Hi, class. I am sharing with you my self-speech later in this announcement post, but I wanted to give you just a little bit of information about how I would approach it if you have never given a speech before. So we're using this speech as a speech of self-introduction. It is a special occasion speech instead of introducing somebody else, which you might do if you were at a big event and you were the introductory speaker. You're introducing yourself. So the way I approach any speech is start with the body. And I would just take out a piece of paper and I would write down all kinds of things that you could share about your life. And you can do a biographical sketch if that's what you want to do. So I just start young and I would just put some things on a piece of paper. In fact, if you look at your text on page 43, it has a mind map about things that they could share about the great outdoors. But let's just say that you want to talk about life events. You could talk about hobbies. You could talk about future dreams, why you want to be an engineer, those kind of things. Put it all down on a piece of paper. And then look for themes that emerge. Like maybe you see a family theme that goes through, or maybe you see a love of travel that has gone through being young and then your middle years and your future plans that you always want to be traveling. So look for themes, and you can either take the approach of trying to cover your whole life. And if you do that, regardless of how young you are, 18 main points, if you've lived 18 years, is a lot of main points. So you still are going to need to chunk your life into maybe your early years, your middle years, and your years now, or your early years, your educational years, and your future plans. You can chunk however you want, but usually in a 5-minute speech, 2 to 5 main points is all that you can do. And I think 5 of these is even stretching it, because what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to spend about 3.5 to 4 minutes on the body. Give yourself enough time for an introduction and a conclusion, and then you're going to have over a 5-minute speech that way. Now, your grace period is between 4 minutes and 40 seconds to 7 minutes and 20 seconds. So you want to plan accordingly. And when you practice this week and next week, because we're not going to do this till Thursday, you want to practice with time. Practice looking at a clock and know where you should be at the 3-minute mark and those kind of things, because that takes away a lot of your anxiety on speech day. So look at what themes emerge. If you will look at one thing on your piece of paper and you're like, that's what I want to talk about. Like, let's say that you had a diagnosis. Maybe you want to chunk your main points to be life before the diagnosis and life after the diagnosis, life before I became a mom and life after I became a mom. You'll see that the theme that I use is a theme of worry and how worry hasn't served me well as a mom. That's how I define my self-speech. But so once you get your body and you figure out what your themes are going to be, then you can work on your main points. You don't need to research this. This can be totally life experience. So technically, your 3 main points could be 3 separate stories, or even one long story broken into 3 parts. I say you need to break it into parts and not just tell us a story, because you're going to want to have an organizational structure that shows your audience that you are moving through the speech. And so once you identify what your main points are, then you can go back and work on your introduction. Your introduction is going to need to have 3 things. Generally, it's going to have a 4th, but you don't have to have a credibility statement on your self-speech because you are the expert on you. So your self-speech is going to need to have an attention grabber. I use a quote on mine. It's going to need to have a WIFM, and my WIFM that's an acronym for what's in it for me, and me is the audience. And my WIFM, you'll listen when you hear my speech, is so that you might worry less. So it's a reason for people to listen. And then you give a preview statement. And I say, I'm going to tell you how worry affected me with mothering my first child and my second child. So those are the 3 parts of an introduction. The reason you don't go ahead and write your introduction first is because you don't know your preview until you work on that body and know what your main points are. And then there are 2 parts of a conclusion. You want to summarize. You want to tell us, so today I've covered how worry affected the raising of my first son and my second son. And then you want to have a lever. Sometimes the lever goes back to the grabber and it is kind of a bookend approach, so that you might go back to that quote that you started with. But a lever essentially just wants your audience, it's a way to let your audience know that you are finished without saying, I'm done. I don't like when students say, I'm done at the end, or thank you, instead of having just a lever. Have something that is content related that clinches the speech and lets people know that it's finished, because then we'll want to break into a round of applause for you. Okay, I hope this helps. Listen to my speech. Know that I would never give you a speech example in hopes that your speech sounds exactly like mine, because that is just one way to give a self speech. That is not the way to give a self speech. But I wanted to offer you mine to prove to you I'm not asking you to do something I haven't done, but also to allow you to get to know me better. So I look forward to your self speech. Remember, I'm an email away, eegrant@lc.edu. I'd love to help you along the way of planning this speech of self introduction. Have a great week.